Hello my dear friends, how have you been? I do hope I find you all in good health and safe and sound. I'm Vördr and today I'm going to talk about Vardlokkur, supposedly a type of chanted incantation or invocation, a magical tune of sorts, used at the start of the Seiðr performance. But we shall see more about this, throughout this entire video, obviously. Now, this video today is part of the video I have done 2 years ago or so, I don't remember, but concerning the parts of the self in Old Norse spirituality. On that video, I have presented to you 10 concepts, and ever since I've been developing each one of them. Because, well, indeed, there's much to say about each one of those concepts. So on that video, it was just a sort of general presentation, an introduction to those concepts. One of such concepts in that video was the Vard, or the Vårðr, which in its plural form is Vördr, which I've also explored on the video about supernatural entities of Old Norse spirituality. Now, this Vårðr or the Vördr, plural, are presented to us in the Old Norse sources as being a sort of warden spirits, some sort of protective entities, guardian entities, which isn't actually far from its original understanding to a certain extent, but it's much more complicated than that, which is precisely why I'm making this video, obviously. You see, as Christianity was progressively incorporated into the religious sphere of the Old Norse society, many concepts have obviously changed, especially the religious world views of the pre-Christian Scandinavian people. So, the conception of the Vard or the Vårðr progressively became an understanding closer to guardian angels of a person. So that's the main idea we have nowadays concerning the Vårðr, because indeed in the later Old Norse written sources the Vårðr becomes some sort of a warden spirit, a guardian spirit, a protective spiritual entity of a person. But if we delve deeper into the historical past of the pre-Christian Old Norse society, and indeed with the help of archaeology and obviously the comparative studies between Old Norse supernatural conceptions and with Arctic shamanism, we may get a better idea of the original conceptions and meanings of this Vard or Vårdr. Old Norse Vördr, and its plural form is Vördr. This video is also part of the most recent video I have done about Gullveig, which you can see right here in this right upper corner. So if you haven't watched that video yet, please, I do advise you to watch it first. Retain as much information as you can from that video, and then come back to this one, so you might better understand or better grasp certain ideas and conceptions expressed in this video today, especially when it comes to the assistance of the Völva in a Seidr performance or a Seidr ritual. So in this video today I shall explore the song Vardlokkur, as well as a quick note on the assistance in the Seidr performance or ritual or ceremony. Just a quick note, because it may give us some clues as well, and then I shall focus on the Vårðr. By the way, I have noticed that some of you have written down in the comments below in many videos that I repeat myself a lot throughout the videos, but well, that's on purpose actually, so the information might reach you, so you may interiorize it in a better way and remember the names and the concepts and all of that. Because if I say things only once, there is a great chance that it will be forgotten. So throughout the videos I obviously repeat some stuff on purpose, so you might remember all of those things and interiorize them. And well, I'm afraid I'm going to do the exact same thing in this video to help you interiorize and memorize. So, well, I'm not here just dumping information, right? I'm here to teach, to exchange and share knowledge with all of you. And in turn, I also learn and receive a lot of knowledge from all of you. Now, with no more delay, please, let's get started. The song Vardlokkur, in general terms, is specifically the name of an incantation or magical song or tune which was sung at the beginning of a Seidr performance. Or better still, at the very beginning of a prophetic session, as Seidr was indeed mainly a divination method. Certainly used for other purposes, but the great majority of the written sources, place Seidr as a divinatory art, and the woman who practiced Seidr was often called a volva, a prophetess or a seeress, but also Seidkona, a woman practitioner of Seidr. Although Seidkona may have been a later general term to describe or to designate a woman who practiced magic in general, the pagan magic, as Seidr seems to have been a term which, with Christianization, became a general term to describe women's pagan magic in general in the Scandinavian society. So the best term is definitely Völva, a prophetess or a seeress, and also spåkona, spå meaning divination. So it would be something like a woman who practices the art of divination. But also we have Seiðr, which seems to have been specifically a title for the women who practiced Seidr, who were prophetesses, to be more precise, sorceresses, quite possibly women that did not actually belong to the Old Norse society, but Sami women that wandered about the countryside to prophesy to whoever was willing to pay handsomely for prophecy. Don't worry, I'm not going to develop on that in this video, on the term and title Seiðr. So if you are interested in exploring the concept of Seiðr and this seeress or prophetess, please do watch my video on Gullveig, where I explore this in more detail and in more depth. And please pay close attention to the notes on that video. Anyway, it would seem that indeed there would be singing incantations or magical songs at the start of a Seidr performance or a Seidr ritual. And these were perhaps what we know from the sources to be spell songs, which is Galdr. Galdr in the medieval Icelandic society was completely detached from Seidr, as Seidr progressively became the term to designate the general magic performed by pagan women. And so Galdr was equated to poetry, which was the sole province of male skalds, male poets. And as such, Galdr in the medieval Icelandic society became the equivalent of male magic. It became a totally different type of magic, closer to poetry, spell song, singing incantations, formulas, therefore more prestigious in a patriarchal society of that time. Whilst Seidr became something undignified, disgraceful and dishonorable in the early Catholic Scandinavian society, and at some point completely forbidden the practice of Seidr, and a lot more denigrating views on Seidr with the advent of Christianity and with the rise of Protestantism. But in the pagan past, it seems that Galdr was very much part of Seidr. Spell songs or singing incantations or magical tunes at the start of a Seidr ceremony. Now, these songs could have been sung by the Völva herself, but it's not likely. By the Prophetess or the Seeress, or by those who accompanied the Völva, that is more likely. A group of women which formed a sort of choir and sang the songs, which we shall get to that further ahead. But we have the name of a song which was called Vardlokkur. I will break this name for you further ahead as well, don't worry. But it seems that it isn't the name of a specific song, but one of the terms given to the singing incantations, the magical tunes at the beginning of a Seidr performance, or a type of chant. And its purpose was to call upon the spirits, to bind them, trap them, or to attract them, and from them the Völva, the Seeress, the Prophetess, would receive the prophecy, or would receive insight, knowledge. She would listen to the spirits, so she could prophesy. As we take it from the sources, in the Landnámabók, to be more precise, such songs were also called in medieval Icelandic as Sexuality, which is magic tune in the Seidr performance. So calling it Vardlokkur isn't a name of a specific song or a singing incantation, but another term for the chanting evocation at the beginning of a Seidr performance. However, Vardlokkur tells a lot more about the meaning and purpose of these songs, of these chants. We shall get to that. So, we have the 13th century account of Eiriks Saga, which gives us a depiction of divinatory rituals among pagan/Christian Icelandic settlers in Greenland. Eiriks Saga is a very good source that sheds some light on the colonization of Greenland, as well as the forays led by the colonists in Vinland. Vinland being apparently mainland North America. Anyway, in the early chapters of the saga, Eiriks Saga, the settlers face a very long epidemic, which obviously affects their entire lives and the entire economy, so the settlers are afraid and uncertain concerning the coming year, obviously. It feels like I'm talking about the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. So, they are uncertain concerning the future, concerning the outcome of this terrible event. So a prominent farmer, a rich, very rich, wealthy farmer in the region, in Greenland, invites an itinerant seer to his home to perform a divinatory ritual. And pay close attention to this. A wandering seer, a wandering prophetess, in this case, and in Greenland. Now, this woman, practitioner of divinatory arts, what the Old Norse people would precisely call Seidr, she is named Thorbjörg. and to her a special meal is given, made out of different animals' hearts. She is allowed to spend the night and a day at the farm before beginning her acts of prophecy, her ceremony. At Thorbjörg's bidding, the women of the farm gather in a circle around the cirrus platform to sing a special incantation. But the women of the farm did not know this special incantation, this magical tune, this chant. So it's actually a young woman visiting from Iceland that ends up chanting this magical tune. After the performance has come to an end, the saga tells us of other details. The cirrus gives thanks for the chant, and she tells that the chant itself was so lovely performed that the spirits that wished to stay away were cocked up in the singing, in the chanting, and were drawn to it. They gathered around, and now through them the cirrus will receive information. So the first thing we have here is the fact that the entire chanting was supposed to be performed by the women of the farm, by a group of women to help calling upon the local spirits from whom the cirrus, the prophetess, will gather information, insight. From them she will have knowledge so she can prophesy. But the chant was performed by another woman, a young girl who was the only one who knew the tune, the magical tune. But the objective of the chanting remained the exact same, and the spirits gathered around anyway. Thereafter, the cirrus is able to answer both the collective and the individual questions of her host and his assembled neighbors. Now, this account is particularly interesting because it was written, without a doubt, by a 13th century Christian writer, but he describes with so much detail this seemingly shamanic session among the Icelandic/Greenlandic community that it shows us actually that the new faith, Christianity, did not fully replace yet pre-Christian methods of divination for some time, at least in the north. But it's particularly interesting the fact that it is a wandering cirrus in Greenland that comes to perform this sort of semi-shamanic ceremony to the little Icelandic community in Greenland. And I'm saying semi-shamanic ceremony or ritual only because it has some parallels with shamanic ritual indeed, but it may not actually be shamanism in its full sense, but a ritual performance with a certain degree of unconsciousness from the part of the Seidr performer. And as I've pointed out before in other videos, especially on the one about Gullveig and the figure of the Völva, the prophetess, throughout the sources, the written sources, the Vördr, which is the plural form for Völva, the prophetesses or the seeresses of Old Norse society, are always portrayed as being wandering women, never truly welcomed within the Old Norse society, and they are actually seen as outsiders. They do not live in a community, nor are they welcomed in it unless when people want their prophecy, and so they will reward them handsomely for their prophecy. And indeed, they are always portrayed in Old Norse accounts as being evil, strange, wicked, but they were also revered as well as feared, and always outsiders. There's quite the pejorative inclination actually to speak about these wandering prophetesses in Old Norse written sources as unwelcomed foreigners, outsiders. The wandering Völva seems to be, as I've explained on the video about Gullveig again, not a woman of the Old Norse society, but a wandering Sami woman, soothsayer, a seeress, a woman from another culture from outside the border or indeed beyond the border of the Old Norse society. in mainland Scandinavia at least, which would literally be the land of the Sami. And this matches with the account of Eiriks Saga, because they are in Greenland, and it's a wandering Cirrus they sought after. These were Icelandic colonists living in Greenland, in a close and small community, in a moment of religious transition, as they are clearly Christian but maintain certain pre-Christian, certain pagan traditions. But it is in Greenland, in a small community of colonists, quite early in the colonization process, so no one would actually venture far into unknown territory. This account is from the early stages of colonization of Greenland, from the part of Icelanders. So we have a wandering Cirrus, but from where exactly? She isn't an Icelander, clearly. She isn't a Völva from continental Scandinavia, so she wouldn't be a Sami woman. So probably she is a native from Greenland. Throughout the Old Norse written sources, the prophetesses and Cirruses always seem to be women from outside the Old Norse society. Not necessarily shamans, but certainly with a semi-shamanic characterization to their prophetic performances. This isn't a case of shamanism in Old Norse society, in this account, Eiriks Saga, because it's clear that shamanic performances among pre-Christian Scandinavian Old Norse people died out since at least the very end of the Iron Age, and these accounts are all from the medieval period. This is a case of circumpolar shamanism, Arctic shamanism to be more precise. The performances of the Vördr match some aspects of Arctic shamanism. In mainland Scandinavia, these prophetesses would most likely be either Sami women or Finns. And in the account of Eiriks Saga, this Cirrus was most likely a native woman from Greenland, performing a ceremony, a ritual with a certain shamanic or semi-shamanic behavior, performing it to the Icelandic community in Greenland. This is why, again, I urge you to watch the video I have made about Gullveig in this information icon in this right upper corner, especially the etymological significance of the name and term Seiðr, which throughout the sources, 99% of the cases is precisely to designate sorceresses, a title that means sorceresses, given to women practitioners of Seidr, prophetesses living outside the Old Norse society, beyond the border to be more specific. Women who kept the old ways and lived in the old settlements, in the old places outside the civilized panorama. But I won't repeat myself in this video. But let's see what more can be said concerning Eiriks Saga and this probable Greenland native Cirrus. Please. Before we move any further, perhaps it's necessary to express a general understanding of Seidr and the Völva that will help me to explain the case in Eiriks Saga, as well as the songs or the magical tunes and the assistance of the Völva, just to create a little bit of context. So, the divination rite in which the Völva took part was known as Seidr. In a couple of accounts, we actually have the Völva sitting on a raised seat high above the ground. A platform of sorts. Well, it is a platform, which was created to raise the Völva, and from up there she would give prophecy. This platform is literally called Seidr, which means Seidr platform precisely. From this exalted seat, the Völva is able to see what is normally hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. And this already brings us to the account of Eiriks Saga, where the Greenland Cirrus is on a platform, as previously spoken, and the women of the farm gather around this platform where the Cirrus is positioned, and they gather to chant what the Cirrus has asked for. Archaeologically speaking, these platforms have been found, actually. I have spoken about this on the video, if I'm not mistaken, the video about the cult of the dead in Old Norse religion, where we can clearly see in Iron Age and Viking period burial mounds that some were purposely flattened on the top. And there was some sort of structure placed in there, probably temporary, where someone would sit on them or maybe stand up, but the purpose would have been to be on that platform precisely to speak to an audience from a platform on a raised ground. And these burial mounds, flattened on the top, are often located precisely near communities with a considerable size, as well as burial mounds near the local assemblies. And we have the case of the 9th century tapestry of the Osberg ship burial, where such a platform is depicted in the illustration, or so it seems. Now, the Völva on her seat would sometimes be surrounded by a number of singers, like a sort of choir, who chanted the incantation required for the Völva to begin her work of divination. This is attested in a couple of accounts. One good example is a relatively early account of a visit from a Völva to a farm in northern Norway in Vardlokkur Old Saga, where she is accompanied by a choir of 15 young women, probably 15 young women, and we are certain that other 15 people were maidens. Which, unfortunately, it's an account that I forgot to mention on the video about Gullveig, to reinforce what I said in that video concerning virgin young girls who were the initiates, the beginners in the arts of prophecy and divination. Precisely the young virgin women, young virgin girls, young girls, as the candidates to become sorceresses. But indeed, we have the figure of the Völva in a couple of accounts, accompanied by a group of women who would sing songs, chant incantations, magical tunes at the beginning of a Seidr ceremony. In Eiriks' Saga, the Völva indeed asked that one particular song called Vardlokkur should be sung, but no one in the little Icelandic community in Greenland actually knew this particular song, until it was discovered that a young girl on a visit from Iceland to Greenland had been taught the song by her nurse in childhood. This young girl was a Christian, and obviously, as such, she was very reluctant to take part in this Seidr ceremony and sing the song that was being asked for this hidden prophetess, this Völva. But eventually, she was finally persuaded to sing the song so that the ceremony could continue, or indeed could actually start. Now, this is particularly interesting because we have a series asking for a specific song called Vardlokkur, at least in the written sources, but the Icelandic community in Greenland have no idea whatsoever how to sing the song. They don't know it, except for a young Christian girl who was taught this song by her nurse when she was a child. If indeed this Völva, this prophetess, is a native from Greenland, it is only natural that the Icelandic colonists have absolutely no knowledge about this specific song. The only one that knows it is a Christian young girl from Iceland who got this song from her nurse when she was a little baby. Now, as you know, Scandinavians had slaves, thrallar, thralls. The term thrall for slave can actually encompass a couple of different categories of slaves in the Old Norse and medieval Icelandic societies. There were those who were forced into slavery as a means of punishment for a crime, so it could be anyone within the medieval Scandinavian society. Also, those who lost absolutely everything, and as a form of survival, they gave themselves to slavery, to have food, shelter, and also payment for their work. And of course, obviously, there were those whose lands had been occupied, raided, conquered, basically invaded, and turned into slaves. The process of colonization from the part of the Old Norse and medieval Icelanders certainly created many slaves from all sorts of lands. So I have no doubt that the natives from Greenland had been enslaved. So it's curious that an Icelandic Christian girl visiting Greenland knows this song which had been taught by her nurse. This nurse can very well be a native Greenlander turned into slave, or a Sami from continental Scandinavia, from Sapmi, kept as a slave and as a nurse to this Icelandic girl, who in turn taught the girl the native song. Because indeed it's curious to notice that in the Icelandic community in Greenland, no one knows the song. And why is that? Because most likely it is a traditional song, a magical incantation from the natives of Greenland. So the song would actually be sung in their native tongue. And most likely the name of the song would not even be Vardlokkur, but something else, possibly in an Inuit dialect, or a common sort of rhyme with a specific tune that was known among peoples of the circumpolar region, within Arctic traditional societies. The name Vardlokkur is most likely the old Scandinavian term to describe the song, to describe this chant, as Vard is in reference to the Vårðr. The plural form is Vördr, which are specific spiritual entities. And lokkur comes from the Old Norse verb, lokka, which is to bind, or shut, to close, to end, which is why Vardlokkur is often translated as the song to bind the spirits. So what we have here, possibly, is a type of incantation known among native peoples of the Arctic regions. And the purpose of the song is to call upon or to lock the spirits. And as such, the Christian writer of Eiriks Saga understood the purpose of the song and called it specifically Vardlokkur, to bind the spirits or to call upon the spirits. Because indeed we have other terms for such songs. As I said before, in the Landnámabók, the same type of song is called Sexuality, magic tune or Seidr tune. Specifically a song in a Seidr performance. But in here, probably we have the term Seidr as a later Christian interpretation for magic in general performed by women, by the pagan women. So it would be, in fact, originally a magical song in a Seidr performance, just like the one labeled Vardlokkur in the Seidr ceremony or ritual required by the Greenland Cirrus, right? Now, the name of this magical tune or magical incantation is Vardlokkur. It is related to the Scots dialect word warlock, which has been used quite often, as you know it, to designate a wizard. And the meaning is thought to relate to the power to shut in or close. Vardlokkur probably gave origins to the Scots dialect word warlock. And if we explore the term warlock and its implications and the magic art that it is, we come to the conclusion that warlock wasn't actually originally a term to designate a wizard or a person who does some sort of evil magic, but warlock is not magic. Not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but not, as in a fastening made by tying a piece of string and making a knot. As we have seen, the term lokkur comes from the Old Norse verb lokka, to bind, to close, to shut, and Vardlokkur would then be to close or bind the spirits, to tie them and hold them, which is the same thing within warlock, precisely. It is not magic, to bind the specific supernatural force or entity to a knot, to trap magic in a knot. Warlock is a magical performance with the ability to shut in or to close. That is, a person who can perform binding spells. making binding knots, physical or psychological, intended to bind spirits and ward off evil spirits and to lock up or bind their effect, and breaking the knot to release the magical effects. Please read the note below. This is the same thing as the Scandinavian tråknutar, magic knots. Troll in here in reference to magic and supernatural entity, possessor of magic. Troll is magic, so to bind the troll in a knot, which is part of the northern circumpolar tradition of string magic linked to shamanic practices. So this is Vardlokkur. The main purpose is to enclose the spirits, to bind them. As we have seen before in Eiriks Saga account, the Völva specifically says that the spirits were drawn to the song and now they would lend their aid, hear what people had to say or had to ask, revealing things to the Völva and give to her prophecy. So this is the main purpose of the song Vardlokkur, it is a native tune, most likely, to call upon the spirits, so they can come closer, drawn by the tune, and reveal their secrets to the seeress, to the soothsayer, and she then is able to answer the questions from the Icelandic community. So the Völva in Eiriks Saga was most likely a Greenland native, a soothsayer. And with the aid of a young woman, the tune was sung and the spirits were drawn closer, bound, closed in, shut in, remaining in the place and giving their wisdom, their hidden secrets to the seeress. Vardlokkur might be interpreted in two ways, actually. The first one, the song could attract and hold the helping spirits from whom the Völva would obtain her knowledge, insight, which seems indeed to be the purpose, at least in this account of Eiriks Saga. As the seeress, the spokona, to be more precise, which means divination woman, as you know it, therefore a prophetess, in this particular account, she thanked for the song and she said that many spirits had come to the place. The spirits that before wished to remain undisturbed were drawn to the song, and now they will help the prophetess by giving to her their wisdom, so she can answer the questions, the collective and individual questions of the community. Now, the second interpretation could actually mean that the song, this magical tune, Vardlokkur, had the power to arouse the Völva from her state of trance and summon back her wandering spirit to be enclosed in her body, to wake her up. This is Vardlokkur, to lock, to bind or enclose the spirit. Indeed, Vardr is a specific helping spirit, a tutelary spirit to be more precise. And for more information on that, please do watch the video I have done precisely on helping spirits in Seidr. But the song Vardlokkur could actually also have the purpose to bind the spirit of the prophetess. Because indeed, if we are in the presence of a native woman whose entire performance is, at the very least, a semi-shamanic performance, maybe she would require an altered state of consciousness to communicate with the spirits that were drawn by the song, and from them receive knowledge in an altered state of consciousness. In that case, she would require something to call her back, send her wandering spirit back into her body, into safety. And that would also have been perhaps the purpose of the song Vardlokkur, to be sung at the beginning of such a ceremony or ritual, to call the spirits, and then maybe another chant at the very end of this session to call back the spirit of the prophetess. Of course, this second interpretation isn't indicated in this particular account in Eiriks Saga, but there are parallels in other accounts and in descriptions of shamanic ceremonies in Northern Europe and Siberia. Bear it with me, please. We have accounts of shamanic, of ancient Sami people and their shamanic performances. The Sami shaman, the Noaidi to be more precise, was usually a man, but he was often assisted sometimes, or many times, by his wife or also a young maiden girl. And she was his assistant, and their purpose was precisely to sing a song to attract back the shaman's spirit. So it is particularly interesting, the series in Eiriks Saga having the song sung by the Christian young girl, which most likely was a maiden, a virgin girl. And she thanks for the song, she replies to the collective and individual questions of the community, and she rewards the young girl for her help by telling her what her future was to be. It is implied in a number of accounts, in the Old Norse written sources, that the Völva obtained knowledge while in a state of trance. She is said to gape and fall down as though dead, to be roused with difficulty, and to be utterly exhausted when the ceremony is over. So this creates some parallels with a shamanic performance, especially among Eskimo, Sami, Finno-Ugric and Turco-Tatar peoples. But of course, saying that the Völva entered in a trance might be pushing it a little bit too far. Not in the sense of having her spirit actually wandering about in the spiritual world, not an out-of-body experience per se, as we understand in shamanism, but in the case of the Völva, it would most likely be spirit possession, and from those spirits she would receive knowledge. Please, read the note below. Now, the costume of the Völva, the Prophetess in Eiriks Saga, is actually described in detail. It consisted in a blue cloak decorated with stones and with straps or hangings, a hood, gloves of catskin lined with white fur, calfskin boots with the hairy side outwards, glass beads, a skin pouch full of charms, and a staff bound in brass with a knob at the end. Well, she was richly adorned, and this actually has many similarities with many shamanic costumes in at least northern Eastern Europe and Siberia. But the main difference in here is that in shamanic sessions of such people, drumming and dancing are generally used by shamans in these areas to induce a state of ecstasy, which in fact drumming and dancing play no part in the Old Norse accounts of Seidr. Moreover, the Völva does not conduct ceremonies for healing purposes, as is customary for shamans among the Sami, Eskimo, and other peoples. Seiðr in the written sources is often depicted as essentially being a divination ceremony, and occasionally also used for hostile purposes to affect the minds of others or affect events, but also sometimes to send forth the mind in search for answers. There are definitely shamanic parallels here, but not fully shamanism. The Völva would mainly be a prophetess, a sort of oracle, whose semi-shamanic performances were sometimes sought after, but she would always be a wandering woman, a soothsayer, wandering about the countryside and giving prophecy to whoever was willing to reward her for her art. Now let's talk about the assistants who assisted the Völva in her performance, because in Eiriks Saga account, indeed, we have this well expressed that a song is required and the women of the farm gather around to sing it. But only after the young maiden sings the song, and apparently the rest of the women follow her in her singing. Maybe, perhaps. One of the important elements in a Seidr performance or ritual, as we clearly can read from many Old Norse written sources, was precisely the presence of a group of people who would in some way assist the performer of Seidr. As far as I know, we do not have any indications of these assistants being male, but it could actually be possible. But we do have sources, one of which I've spoken previously, of these assistants being women. And at least part of them were maidens, virgin young girls. And I'm a little bit mad at myself because I completely forgot to add this important account to the video on Gullveig, where I specifically demonstrate this idea of the candidates or the beginners to become Völvur, to be prophetesses and also sorceresses, to have been maidens, young virgin girls, which seems to have been a possible taboo or requirement among this community of women whose magical performances were related to prophecy and divination. Anyway, in Vardlokk's Saga, the previous example I have given, it is explicitly stated that the seeress traveled with a number of retainers. In this account, the Völva arrives with 15 unspecified young people that could be male, and other 15 maidens, 15 virgin young girls. In this account, the ceremony is conducted privately, at night, while the household sleeps, and the assistants participate in the night rituals with the Völva. It doesn't specifically say in which or what these rituals consisted, but it is mentioned that there was a great chanting. What is particularly interesting about this account is that the Völva in question is called precisely an Seidr. And as I've pointed out in the video about Gullveig, Seidr in 99% of the Old Norse written sources is the title given to sorceresses, which seem to have been Sami women from outside Old Norse society. And indeed this account is placed in northern Norway, so that would either be Sami territory or close to the border with Sami. We have several other accounts where we find the same pattern, the exact same pattern, this performer of Seidr, the Völva, the Seidkona, Spákona or Seidr, wandering about, visiting a specific community or a farm and performing her rituals, giving prophecy and being assisted by a group of people. Sometimes those come with her, sometimes the women of the place, of the farm or the household, join the prophetess. And there is singing. There is always this necessity to sing, which would either be to call upon the spirits or to call back the spirit of the prophetess while in ecstasy, or both. We do not know the full purpose of the assistance of the Völva, although I have already given one possible reason, one possible meaning in the video about Gullveig as being the beginners being taught by the seeress, so they accompany the seeress, the prophetess, so they may learn the songs and the performances and the rituals. So one day they might become the seeresses themselves. It was most likely groups of virgin young girls, and it's quite possible there were boys as well. And if indeed being virgin was one of the requirements, as I've pointed out in the video about Gullveig, we might understand part of the mockery towards man who performed Seidr. Of course, such mockery as an expression provoked by the mentality of late Old Norse peoples in their their social standards, as Seidr was understood in later sources and with the advent of Christianity as being the magic of women. So for a man to practice it, well, they would have to follow the same rules and taboos applied to virgin young girls candidates to become seeresses. So the assistance purposes would be to learn from the prophetess, at least, as well as to assist her in her songs, specific tunes. Most likely we are in the presence of Galdr, not particularly formulated words, but a tune, some kind of moaning, humming, perhaps throat singing, or a high-pitched vocal as a form of calling So no lyrics per se, but a humming tune to induce in ecstasy. Because indeed, in many Arctic shamanic performances, ecstasy or trance sometimes isn't induced solely by the beating of a drum, but by specific sounds performed either by the shaman or by the community that participates in the initial rituals to aid the shaman. Precisely. In shamanism, a shaman's ritual is a ritual performance and not a musical performance. A shaman uses various ways of making sounds to which different ritual purposes are ascribed. It's not solely the drum, but also actual song, vocality. There is often the imitation of animal sounds to call upon the animal helping spirits, for instance. Sounds meant to alter the listener's state of mind, to enter in ecstasy. In tribal animistic cultures in which survival involves close contact with nature, such cultures give a great emphasis to oral tradition. They are oral cultures, where sound often connects inner feelings to features of the natural environment. Imitation of nature's sounds. The Sami are a totally oral culture, and the yoik, the traditional form of song in Sami music performance, often involves the imitation of sounds of nature, including of animals. The vocal expression, the vocality expresses the feelings provoked by the contact with nature and calling upon the very ambience of the nature in which the Sami are inserted. The yoik is a vocal expression which we can place in the category of songs of the spirits. The yoik is a way of invoking an animal, a person, a part of the natural world itself. The yoik comprises sounds that rise spontaneously from the spirit, from the heart, and from the mind. The sounds of animals, of the winds, of a person's innermost thoughts. The yoik isn't about simply being an expression of the soul and pouring out sound, but in fact the objective is to sing the thing into being. It is invoking to be present, to exist and manifest itself. It's to call upon the forces and spirits of nature to be manifested through the yoik and to exist, to call upon them. So let's not forget that the Völva, in the great majority of accounts, seems indeed to be an outsider, a person from beyond the boundary of Old Norse society. So her songs in performance would have been native songs, most likely. As we are speaking of Vardlokkur, it would have been a calling among Greenland natives, among Inuit, in the specific case of Eiriks Saga. Vardlokkur is to bind or call the spirits, so it would have been a vocal expression, an invocation through sound, no words, no lyrics, but a tune whose vibrations were to sing into being the spirits. The purpose would be vibration, a song sung by assistants, so the prophetess would enter in trance, or at the very least ecstasy, by the vibration of such songs. Vardlokkur in Eiriks Saga is precisely to call the spirits of the place. They are drawn to the song, they are sung into being. The sounds produced would be the sounds of nature, animals, people, things of the natural world, and interaction with the natural world and its supernatural or spiritual entities. So Vardlokkur would be something close to the Sami yoik, perhaps. And I cannot help to think that throughout the Old Norse written sources, the Völva requires female assistants, maidens, young girls. So could it be that the vibrations of the tune had to specifically be high-pitched vibrations, hence the reason why women were required? So this also makes me think about men performing Seidr and singing such songs. If indeed these were high-pitched vocals, does that mean that men were castrated to maintain the ability to reach high-pitched vibrations with the voice, castration of the male before puberty to prevent sexual maturity, castration of young boys to prevent the boys' larynx from being transformed by the normal physiological events of puberty. As a result, the vocal range is largely retained, and the voice develops into adulthood in a unique way. So this may be yet another reason why men practicing Seidr were considered to be effeminate in the late Old Norse society, because they were castrated. But it was a requirement so they could continue to sing such songs, to reach such vibration with the voice in Seidr performances. Of course, I might be pushing this a little bit too far, I know, but remember something very important. Odin was the male god of Seidr and in the sources often considered effeminate. Odin, as the god of Seidr, is often considered unmanly in the Old Norse written sources. In the sources Grimnismal and Gylfaginning, to be more precise, Odin, as the great god of Seidr, calls himself Jalk, which means the gelding, castrated precisely. In most shamanic communities all across the globe, the shaman, be that man or women, often present physical differences, either because they were born like that or due to the circumstances of life, their physical appearance changes. And such physical changes are often seen as a sign that that person has potential to become a shaman. It is given a special attention to hermaphroditic people, for instance, in shamanism, as having the potential in them to become great shamans. A great attention is also given to people whose genitals have some form of uniqueness, which, of course, in our modern societies, detached from shamanism, are seen as anomalies or birth deficiencies. But in shamanic communities, this is a great advantage if the person, of course, is able to pass all the initiations and finally becomes a shaman. It is a sign of great potential. Returning to the song or chant Vardlokkur in Eiriks Saga, as well as other sources, it's clear that such a song and other similar songs are chanted by a group of women who gather around the Seidr performer. However, in Eiriks Saga specifically, only one woman knows the song, as I said before, so she sings alone, and presumably other women of the farm join in. But it isn't actually clear if they have any actual part to play. But in other accounts, as demonstrated previously, the usual schema is to have a group of people singing the required chant. And indeed, in Eiriks Saga, the Prophetess asks for the women of the farm. She expects a group of women to aid her by chanting the song to call or to bind the spirits. But unfortunately, they don't know the song. But the day is saved by a young Christian girl, as was said before. Now, Vardlokkur, it seems indeed that the initial stem of the term, which is Vard, derives from Vördr, which in plural is Vördr. I've already explored the Vördr entity in the video I have done about helping spirits in Seidr, which I'll leave the link to the video, as well as other videos that may contain useful information to help you navigating around these subjects. So I will leave those links down below in the description of this video, as well as a couple of suggested videos, 4 videos at the end of this very video. Again, I don't want to repeat myself for your own sake and for the sake of this video, so we won't extend it too long or too much. But as I've pointed out in the video about helping spirits in Seidr, I came to the conclusion that the Vördr is a helping spirit indeed, but enters in the category of tutelary spirits, which are specific spirits, in shamanic terms, closer to the shaman guiding spirits, spirits attached to the shaman, since the person officially became a shaman. As such, those spirits are the guiding entities of the shaman, aiding the shaman in a variety of circumstances, which is why they have been portrayed as guardian angels, as a Christian interpretation of these tutelary spirits. Indeed, Vördr means guard, watch, protector, warden. So it seems clear that in the context of Vardlokkur, the purpose is to call upon tutelary spirits. So indeed, a sort of guardian spirits, protective spirits, which is a common element of circumpolar belief systems. Then we have the feminine plural form, Vardlokkur, which in the sources, not just Eiriks Saga, but there's another source in which Vardlokkur appears, and if I'm not mistaken, it is in Thorfinn's Saga Kelsefnis. In both sources, Vardlokkur appears in both forms with 1k and 2ks, which actually gives us two possible meanings. One based on the Old Norse verb lokka, as previously said, which means to lock, close, or to bind, fastening, and we have lokka with 2ks, which is entice, to call upon, to attract. If we take into consideration again that Vardlokkur gave rise possibly to the Scots dialect word warlock, which is precisely a magical art to attract and bind spiritual entities and forces, Vardlokkur with 1k would then be to lock or bind, or better still to fasten, and the guardian spirit, the Vördr, to lock the spirit in under the power of the summoner. And Vardlokkur with 2ks would be the enticement of the guardian spirit, attracting, luring the spirits to be present in there so they may aid the prophetess, lock them inside the prophetess or the seeress of the soothsayer. Both are actually correct. By far, Eiriks Saga is the written source with more detail concerning Vardlokkur and these types of songs or chants in a Seidr performance. In a performance in which the aim is divination, prophecy. In Eiriks Saga, indeed, the Völva specifically said that the song attracted the attention of the spirits. It lured them, drawn them closer, and then they are locked in. They remain in place, probably inside the Völva. And as such, the Seidr performer is aided by such spirits, and through them she is able to answer the questions of the community. Vardlokkur would therefore seem to be a means of summoning, culling, and binding the spirits of protection, the tutelary spirits. And this is particularly important because if indeed these are tutelary spirits, guardian spirits, protective entities, they are summoned precisely to protect the Seidr performer from being attacked by other spiritual entities. They give protection, they defend the Völva against attacks by other supernatural entities. Because the spirits have been drawn, they have been attracted, and while in trance, or at least ecstasy, or some other kind of unconscious situation the Völva is in, her spirit wanders, and she is vulnerable to the attacks of other spirits and of people. So it is necessary to summon the tutelary spirits to protect her spirit and her body from other spirits that have been lured by the chant. Or, as pointed out before on a note, I hope I haven't forgotten to put a note while editing this video, the cases in which the Völva is said to either gape or yawning, her mouth is open, may actually be cases of spirit possession, which also makes sense because the Völva would attract the spirits, be possessed by them, and as such, she gathers information from them. And her tutelary spirits are required to protect her from either unwanted possession or to avoid being permanently possessed. So the tutelary spirits act as guardians and protectors in the spirit possession from which the Völva received knowledge, as she incorporates the personality and the identity of the spirits. She locks them in. This actually has parallels in many circumpolar shamanic traditions. When the shaman's spirit is wandering in the spiritual world, the shaman's body and spirit and the mind are vulnerable to attacks from other spirits and from people even. And there is the need to call upon the tutelary spirits, the guardian spirits, which are often the spirits of dead shamans actually, or spiritual entities who have a close connection with the shaman. Remember what I have said earlier. In many Seidr accounts, it is often stated that the Völva in the performance would gape and fall down as if dead, and after it was done, she was roused with difficulty and be utterly exhausted when the ceremony was over. She is vulnerable, and she needs her assistants, both spirit and people, to take care of her. Remember what I've also said earlier, that among the Sami, the shaman, the Noaidi, has an assistant maiden who sings a song to call back the shaman's spirit into the body and into safety. And we have 18th century accounts of shamanism among the Sami. In Sami culture, when the Noaidi, the Sami shaman, when the Noaidi was in ecstasy, there was a girl, a young maiden, who summoned the shaman back to safety. And we have a peculiar account, actually, dated between the 12th and the 13th centuries of a very early written account of a Sami religious ritual. There's a woman who has been struck unconscious by an unseen force, and two rival shamans attempt to recover her lost soul. The two shamans dance, drum, and sing incantations until falling into trance. The inherent danger of their activities is clear when one of the two shamans dies while in trance, because the shaman was the victim of an ambush laid by spirit enemies. So there seems to always be this aspect of vulnerability while in an unconscious state of the mind, which seems to be present in the Vardlokkur account, in Eiriks Saga at least. And the need to call upon the guardian spirits, the assistant spirits, the tutelary spirits, to protect the wandering spirit of the Völva from spirit enemies. After all, the chant attracted many spirits. And there's another interesting parallel with this, which can be found in one Eddic poem called Galdr, which I will put in here on the screen, where there is a specific passage saying Vardlokkur, protect you on all sides. The spirits in this account are associated with Vördr, the Norn who controls fate, which reinforces the notion that the spirits in Vardlokkur are indeed tutelary, to call upon and bind the tutelary spirits, attached to the person, just like fate itself is attached to a person. Spirits bound to the very fate of the person. Tutelary spirits, as I have expressed on the video about helping spirits in Seidr. This particular strophe suggests a chant to bind or to call upon and lock in Vördr, the Norn of fate, to protect on all sides. Vardlokkur heidit her olum megum. The idea of chanting and summoning protection from a spiritual entity, which would have been the main purpose of Vardlokkur. Not only to lure the spirits, but also to call upon the tutelary spirits specifically for protection, while the spirit or the mind of the prophetess wanders or is in a sort of ecstasy and gathers information from the spirits. Which is actually interesting to see that in the sources, the written sources, the Vördr, which is the plural form of Vördr, which is the spirit implicit in the term Vardlokkur, are spiritual entities from whom a prophetess or a sorcerer who summons these spirits receives knowledge from. These spirits are employed to provide their summoner with knowledge of future or distant events, as emissaries or agents with the dead. The Vördr, in particular, can even be the spirits of the departed, of the dead, which makes sense for two main reasons. First, in shamanism, as I've pointed out in the videos about helping spirits in shamanism, the tutelary spirits in particular are often of dead shamans or dead relatives who were once shamans or past shamans of the community who are now dead, who become tutelary spirits and provide knowledge to the shaman. And indeed, as we have seen, the Vördr in Vardlokkur play the role of guardian spirits. Secondly, the great majority of accounts about Seidr and the Völlur, the prophetesses or the seeresses, always have a necromantic aspect to them. They are often dead or seemingly dead prophetesses who are awakened from their deathly slumber. And they provide not only divination, knowledge of future events, but also knowledge of the past, in particular by the contact with the dead, and they themselves having been dead or seemingly dead. The figure of the Völva in the Old Norse written sources as being dead and awakened so she may share her deep wisdom, just like in the account of the Völuspa and Hinduljod, for instance, may not be actual death of the prophetess, but they are being awakened from their trance or their, at the very least, ecstasy, from their unconsciousness, from their out-of-body experience to reveal their secrets, just like the prophetess in Eiriks Saga. Again, remember what I have said earlier in accounts about Seidr and the Völlur. These women are often said to fall down as if dead and then aroused with difficulty. It's a seemingly death state of the mind. A trance, just like in shamanism. So in this case, again, the Vördr is the tutelary spirit, the guardian spirit of the Völva that aids her while in an unconscious situation to protect her from attacks from other spiritual entities. So I understand why the Vördr was equated with the guardian angel figure or conception, but it's much more complicated than that, as you can see. The Völva contacts with the spirits of the dead as well, and also as the Vördr in other sources seem to be exactly the spirits of the dead and tutelary spirits that are of dead people. In this way, Vardlokkur is also to contact the wisdom of the dead, just like in most of the accounts concerning Seidr. The Völlur and that are awakened from their death to reveal the secrets of the grave, the secrets of death. So in conclusion, Vardlokkur is a chant, possibly a high-pitched tune, not an actual song with lyrics, not a formula, but it fits into a high-pitched tune, a calling in which the main objective is to cause the Seidr performer to fall into unconsciousness, which may not actually be trance, as I've explained before, on a note, but ecstasy. Not as an out-of-body experience in this particular performance, but rather it's to create a receptive state of the mind to hear information passed to the Seidr performer by the spirits that were summoned. The spirits are attracted by the chant itself, and the Seidr performer summons the tutelary spirits for protection, which are the Vördr, the plural form of Vördr, which appear to have fulfilled a more protective role. And the spirits of the dead are also lured, so the Seidr performer may obtain knowledge from them. so she can prophesy. It was also a chant normally pronounced by a group of women who gathered around the Völva, or the Seidr, or the Spákana, or the Seiðr during this performance. Although in Eiriks Saga specifically, as you know it, as was said, the chant is performed by a single woman who was the only one who knew the tune. But the Prophetess in this account did ask for the group of women in the farm. But Vardlokkur fits into other accounts where we clearly have a magic invocation or a magic song and performed by a group of women gathering around the Seidr performer. In these Seidr performances, the role of the spirits is essential, not only for protection of the vulnerable body and mind and spirit of the Seidr performer, but also to receive knowledge. So Vardlokkur would specifically mean attracting or fastening or binding the tutelary spirits. But a more fluid and general meaning, according to its main intention, Vardlokkur means the culling of the spirits. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tack för idag.